to everyone here. Let me start by saying, well, I'm Arun. I am with the Observer Research Foundation as well, where I am part of the tech team in our office in New Delhi. So let me begin by saying thank you to our team at ORF Bombay, Dhawal, Shashi, Saili, and the entire team for putting this together. The Bombay Tech Talks, as Dhawal has already mentioned, is the part of a series of conversations that we're curating on issues that have preeminently figured in policy discussions in Delhi, but for various reasons don't often figure in Bombay. So our hope is to sort of plug a gap where there clearly exists an appetite to know more about policy discussions and more generally what's happening at the interface of business, technology, and policy in India. And to talk through some of that, we have with us somebody who has been with Netflix from the very start, or from the very early stages of Netflix since 2002. David Hyman is the general counsel at Netflix, and the term general counsel usually, is conferred on the top legal officer at an organization, which David is clearly at Netflix, but also. In his case, given the length of his and the breadth of his experience at Netflix, also someone who we are fortunate to have to talk on a wide range of issues that concerns the entertainment platform. The term fireside chat, which is what we're presumably supposed to do in the next 15, 20 minutes, is, I think the origins have to do with the weekly or the monthly radio conversations that Franklin Roosevelt used to have with his people in the United States before the Depression, or during the time of the Depression, the Great Depression, and it has, of course, been abused since by think tanks and public policy organizations to denote all in any conversation. But it's fitting to have David talk to us, given that this is, in fact, the financial and the intellectual center which should be incubating conversations on entertainment, digital policy, and entertainment and business. So it's good to have you here, David, and I hope we can, in the next 10, 15 minutes, talk about as many issues that we can possibly, not just relating to Netflix, but also the future of the entertainment industry as you see it, given that Netflix is very much at the front and center of some of the changes that are happening. So I want to start by asking, this is certainly not your first time in India. And how many times have you been here before?
This is my second time in India.
Okay, so that's, one too many visits to India that you've had. But I did want to ask you, and the first visit was, I believe, some years ago, right?
2017.
2017.
We actually came here as an entire executive team in the early days of streaming.
Between 2017 and 2019, or perhaps even in the years before, I'm guessing Netflix would have had India in its sights at some point well before 2017. I wanted to ask you, the kind of meetings that you have had when you come to this part of the world, and the kind of people that you meet, whether it's regulators or people in the entertainment industry, how have, or for that matter, the people who you talk through conference calls sitting from HQ, how have they changed over the course of the years? And I ask that because I want to know whether the constituency of people who you talk to in India have changed over the course of the last 5 or even the last 2 years, given the tectonic changes that are happening here.
Great. Well, first off, thank you for having me. It's an exciting time for me to be here, and this is certainly a very appropriate forum to talk about and have Netflix at, which is to talk about the future of digital entertainment and video. It's interesting that you ask how things have changed. You're right to point out I've been at Netflix for almost 18 years now. Believe it or not, Netflix is over 20 years old, so I am not there from the beginning. But I've seen a lot of change. And as you highlighted or asked about, the types of conversations that I've had over the years, I would say it's been quite rewarding, and it's actually, for me, to be in India at all is immensely satisfying given where we were in 2002 when I joined the company, which was we were delivering plastics through the mail in the United States only. And if you had asked me in 2019 if I would be sitting in Mumbai talking about the digital delivery of entertainment, I probably would have looked at you in a really weird way. And so when you think about the different people who I've interacted with over the years, it's mostly been with a lot of skeptics about how the future of digital entertainment will be. And so the fact that I'm in a room here of people who want to know more about what that future looks like is immensely satisfying, and I'm excited to sort of talk about how we're on the cusp of what I think is going to be 50 to 100 years of new ways of delivering digital video to consumers around the world.
So, going back to the fact that you've been at Netflix for pretty much, to see the arc of evolution of Netflix from what it was in 2000 to what it is today. And just going back again to the kind of people that you have been speaking to, even in the United States or in other jurisdictions where, the digital economy is perhaps more advanced than it is in India. Did you envision at any point of time that you would have to perhaps be talking to the telecom regulator or regulators of for that matter of any sort? And when you did come to the point of when you did come to the conclusion of that Netflix had to be engaging with the policy community, not just in India, but in the United States or in India, but in even the smallest jurisdiction where you have some sort of commercial presence. People who are part of the film community, people who are part of the film certification community in emerging markets, and of course the telecom regulator, the broadcaster. How did what were the challenges of trying to kickstart some conversation, and how far have you come and how successful have you been in communicating exactly what you wanted to these regulators?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, you talk about the different stakeholders involved in the evolution of digital media. I mean, it runs the gamut from the entertainment side of the house, so everything from film producers, TV producers, production houses, to post-production houses, to telco providers, to CE manufacturers, to legislators, regulators. There's a whole host of people who are interested in that. I think one of the biggest things that we've been engaged in is really trying to educate that whole spectrum of stakeholders as to what that future looks like and what is possible and what isn't possible and how that is evolving. And I think it's a kind of shared experience that we're going through, because in some ways we're just at the cusp of that and trying to explain exactly how that is going to evolve has been relatively uncertain on both sides of the equation. And I think one of the big challenges for us is to make sure that people understand that this is a very dynamic environment, and that thinking about what it looks like today and then to react to that in a way that either from a policymaker standpoint that passes regulations or wants to engage in that business as it exists today is an area that they need to be careful of, because it is so dynamic and evolving. And so I think part of our responsibility and what we've really been doing is trying to educate that stakeholder community about what this future looks like.
I don't want to sort of harp on regulation too much, because I think we have more meaty things to talk about. But just on a final point on that, would it be fair to say that if, as recent as 5 years ago, when policymakers of various hues, whether it's the broadcast guy or the telecom regulator, when the regulator was conceiving legislation or rules or policies to manage the entertainment sector or to manage the technology space, generally speaking, would it be fair to characterize that Netflix at that point of time would be a late entrant to the policy discussion and often reacting to some of those discussions, whereas now, would it be fair to say that regulators in many jurisdictions enact policies or regulations keeping Netflix or other, whether you want to call them OTT platforms or whether you want to whether you want to call them digital media providers? Do you think regulators craft rules keeping Netflix in mind?
Well, I certainly think that to the extent they think about the OTT space, and Netflix as sort of a pioneer in that space is a poster child or representative of that, then it is in part of the discussions. And I think the fact that we've had as much experience as we have in the innovative space gives us authority in speaking with regulators about what the space looks like and what we think it's going to look like. So yeah, I think we're much more involved in that, partially because 5 years ago no one was talking about OTT. It was just at the cusp, and now it's kind of much more present, both from a business standpoint and across all the different stakeholders.
Has that made your job less easy? Or is it, do you feel that you earn your keep?
I would say my job has never been easy, and that's what makes it fun. It's exciting and things change all the time. I always tell everyone, both at the company, across my team and others, that flexibility is probably the most important characteristic because things change so dramatically.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that you're actually doing on the platform. And I want to sort of begin with a philosophical note, because many of the technological changes that are associated with the delivery and production of information in India today have happened within a very small period of time. So you haven't had the kind of the generational gap that has been associated with the creation and the production of entertainment in, say, the United States, and the coming of age of technology, or the coming of age of digital platforms. So a lot of things are happening, in short, at the same time in India. And it used to be the case that the medium was the message, but Netflix, for instance, has been one of the the heralders of the golden age of television. And in fact, I think if you go to Netflix, you still categorize them as TV shows, whereas they are likely to be seen by a generation of people, including Indians, who will probably never own a television set ever in their life. So you have effectively segregated the medium and the message. And Netflix has come to acquire its own, cultural mores. For instance, Netflix and chill is something that is commonly associated with a generation of youth today. So there are these. The platforms themselves have become a message in some respects, taking over what used to be, the remit of hardware, of computers or television or the radio, which is what led Marshall McLuhan to say that the medium is the message. But the medium has changed. And I want to, understand from you whether the folks at Netflix are seriously thinking about the way in which, the changes in the way in which entertainment is consumed and what it means for the societies in which you operate. I know that's a sort of a broad sweep of a question, but at least in the major jurisdictions, have you begun thinking about how Americans or Indians are beginning to consume entertainment and what it means for them, whether they consume it in the intimate confines of their home or what it means for them to go out still to multiplexes and see movies?
So I'll distill that down into sort of, I think, what is in essence what Netflix is trying to do, and I think what many people in this room are trying to do, which is tell stories. And in that way, the medium and the message are pretty much the same, and that to a certain extent, when you talk about the TV, I don't know how you describe what is a TV, right? It kind of is this your TV now? It's just a smaller TV versus a larger TV. But I do think, to your point, it does make a difference in the way in which you may tell stories. And I think the way that at least I think the industry is coming at it now is much more to think about, it really is fundamentally and always been about storytelling, at least on the entertainment side. It's really about how do we create great stories. And I think the fact that the internet enables a much more global distribution of those stories creates lots of unique opportunities. It creates opportunities for storytellers in India to have their stories told around the globe. And technology enables that in a number of different ways. and enables it through things like easier subtitling, easier dubbing, the ability to watch it when you want and where you want, the fact that you can now watch when you're commuting versus tethered to your home and the antenna. And I think that does enable new ways of creating stories. The fact that you can watch one...
He said that some of it was organic, given that, platforms like Netflix were giving an opportunity to voices that were not being heard before. But some of it, she said, was also contrived in the sense that there is a certain cultural awakening that is happening across the entertainment industry for reasons that we don't have to get into right now, but which are forcing producers and directors and actors and well-established folks in the movie industry and in the entertainment industry in general to hire more women. And they may not necessarily be thinking about, some of it may be tokenism, which according to Kaling, she was why, she said, it's totally fine with me because as long as I see more women involved in the production of entertainment, that's fine with me, whether they take it as a conscious decision or whether it is a part of an organic growth. To the extent that Netflix has been, like I said, at the front and center of some of these, these tectonic changes that have happened in the entertainment industry, how have you approached some of, I don't want to call it a progressive cause, but clearly, you can see that in some of the content that is being produced by Netflix, there is a greater percentage of women that are being involved. So let me ask you the same question. Is it an organic decision or is it a conscious decision that is reflective of our times and what we're going through right now?
I think the answer is it's both. I think what the entertainment industry is experiencing broadly is what society is experiencing broadly. Whether it be the Me Too movement or whether it be a push in STEM research for people in engineering, trying to take a portion of our society that has not had as much opportunity as others, and to create more opportunity for that. So I think it's a combination both of organic and kind of conscious effort that's happening across society.
That goal in India as well?
Absolutely. I think we hold that goal globally for us.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time. I wish we had time to get into a couple of questions, but unfortunately, we are already running late. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in lending a hand to David Hyman.
Thank you.
And I will hand it back to Sally for the rest of the session.
What we're talking about is the ability to take those stories that resonate locally to a global audience and to share more.
To the extent that you are able to share with us the details of it, can you tell us a little bit about Netflix's big run-in with Hollywood this year, in terms of the discussions that went on about including Netflix, for instance, produced movies as part of the running of the Academy Awards. So to the extent that it reflects a broader trend about how Netflix engages, and of course, the big movie industries in different parts of the world engage with Netflix, and how, what is the reckoning there? You are, for instance, quite successful. You have been quite successful in co-opting some of the big stars in Bollywood, for instance, and getting them on board projects that are produced and organized by Netflix. But fundamentally, because the movie industry is not just about actors or actresses, it's also about the people who work behind the entertainment industry, some of them who are very set about their ways. How have your engagements with Hollywood and Bollywood, both of them being just representations of big movie industries everywhere, how have they been and how have they evolved over the past couple of years?
Well, I think, if you look at the Indian marketplace, and you look even in the US, it's really a golden age for creators. And our engagement and that of other OTT players is really about offering new opportunities for these creators. And they've, by and large, all of them have been welcoming to embrace what this means for their own businesses. And so I think we're, like other players in that space, finding a very receptive audience for the creation of new content and for understanding. And part of the reason this room is so crowded is because I think people want to understand what this means from the business and the opportunities it presents. And so that's very exciting.
So again, can you run us through some of, for instance, even exciting you have now a very well-developed India team covering all aspects, ranging from policy to business development. But when a project comes to you in a language other than English, can you, to the extent again that it is possible to tell us laypersons about how that process of business development works, that aspect of business development works, how is it that you treat a project that is not in English but clearly seems exciting and promising and something that, as you said, may have some sort of resonance with a global audience? What is the secret sauce that Netflix is looking for when it picks a sort of a local winner?
I think it goes back to great storytelling, and that's what it is. I mean, even if there are two things. One is we rely on the creatives in the market to tell us if it's a great story, if it's not in English, because certainly the people back in California won't be able to understand that. But we all understand the power of great storytelling. And in many ways, that ability to find a great story and then be able to provide a service that is able to deliver that globally is what we're really looking for.
And as with any content that's produced, whether it's movies or television shows, some movies and some content that's produced by Netflix will be successful, some won't. And by redefining what constitutes the box office, how are you changing, how people are evaluating the commercial or critical success of the content that is being produced by Netflix and its peers?
Well, one of the things that's is different about the OTT space, and especially subscription on demand video, is there is the ability for consumers to access that content when and where they want to, and that content is always available and not necessarily reliant on a certain release date. And so in that way, the notion of box office is really foreign in that environment, because you're really trying to find stories that people can resonate with at different times. And there's not as much reliance on having, an opening weekend that is big. You're able to have that content available and people can discover it and find it. And it's sort of almost, it becomes almost irrelevant for that service.
So you're saying it's a horses for courses approach when it comes to, as you said, the box office is defined differently for different modes of consumption. Whether it's, it's different for a multiplexing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit like comparing apples and oranges, right? And I think some people, because it looks like it's a movie, they want to understand and speak in the language that they have historically heard, and that's a little bit, again, apples to oranges in that way.
Sure. Let me, because Shashi's told me that time's almost up. Let me ask you, one final question, and again has to do with some of the cultural and social changes that have been brought about by Netflix and its, Netflix in many ways. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but Netflix is representative of a larger industry and a larger way, and a sort of a broader way of in which we are increasingly consuming entertainment. I think I read this in an recent interview with Mindy Kaling, who was asked about the representation of women in TV shows and in movies generally, in movies that are coming out. And she was asked to evaluate the very positive, progressive trend of having women, a greater number of women involved in all stages of producing and creating and directing and acting in a movie or a television show. And she, remarkably said that some of it was organic, given that platforms like Netflix were giving an opportunity to voices that were not being heard before. But some of it, she said, was also contrived in the sense that there is a certain cultural awakening that is happening across the entertainment industry for reasons that we don't have to get into right now, but which are forcing producers and directors and actors and well-established folks in the movie industry and in the entertainment industry in general to hire more women. And they may not necessarily be thinking about, some of it may be tokenism, which according to Kaling, she said, it's totally fine with me, because as long as I see more women involved in the production of entertainment, that's fine with me, whether they take it as a conscious decision or whether it is a part of an organic growth. To the extent that Netflix has been, like I said, at the front and center of some of these, these tectonic changes that have happened in the entertainment industry, how have you approached some of, I don't want to call it a progressive cause, but clearly, you can see that in some of the content that is being produced by Netflix, there is a greater percentage of women that are being involved. So let me ask you the same question. Is it an organic decision or is it a conscious decision that is reflective of our times and what we're going through right now?
I think the answer is it's both. I think what the entertainment industry is experiencing broadly is what society is experiencing broadly. You know, whether it be the Me Too movement or whether it be a push in STEM research for people in engineering, trying to, you know, take a portion of our society that has not had as much opportunity as others, and to create more opportunity for that. So I think it's a combination both of organic and, you know, kind of conscious effort that's happening across society.
Can I hold you to that goal in India as well?
Absolutely. I think we hold that goal globally for us.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time. I wish we had time to get into a couple of questions, but unfortunately, we are already running late. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in lending a hand to David Hyman.
Thank you.
And I will hand it back to Sally for the rest of the session.